How was the world's largest land empire built? How could one man's vision create an empire stretching from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe? Genghis Khan wasn't just a warrior. He was also one of the world's smartest rulers. Chinese scholars, Muslim merchants, Christian missionaries, Buddhist monks. He brought them all under one roof. 33 million square kilometers of territory. That's bigger than modern Russia. But here's the real question. How did the leader of a nomadic tribe from the Mongolian steppes manage to govern the world's most advanced civilizations? This isn't just a conquest story. This is the story of history's greatest administrative achievement. And what we're telling you today isn't just how Genghis Khan fought, but how he ruled. Because true genius lies not just in conquering, but in governing what you've conquered. Asterisk. Our story begins in 1162. The Mongolian steppes were one of the most complex and chaotic regions in the world at that time. Hundreds of small tribes, constantly at war with each other. No central authority, no written law, no permanent cities. Just endless grasslands and nomadic peoples living on horseback. Born into this chaos was Temüjin, the child who would later become Genghis Khan, and he saw a different vision. Other tribal leaders only planned for the next battle, the next raid. But Temüjin saw a much bigger picture. His first revolution was in family structure. In traditional Mongol culture, tribal membership was based on blood ties. Temüjin broke this system. He created the Anda system, blood brotherhood. He put his closest friends and most loyal warriors ahead of even his own family. This wasn't just a personal choice. This was the first step toward meritocracy. His conflict with Jamuka was the perfect example of this philosophy. Jamuka was his blood brother, but held traditional views. Nobles should stay noble, slaves should stay slaves, he said. Temüjin argued the complete opposite. Talent matters more than where you're born. This conflict wasn't just a fight between two people. This was a war between two different social concepts. On one side was the old system based on aristocracy. On the other was a new vision based on merit. Temüjin's strategy for uniting tribes was also revolutionary. Other leaders would either destroy rival tribes or enslave them. Temüjin chose different path, integration. He brought warriors from defeated tribes into his own army, but in a mixed way, completely breaking up old tribal structures. When he received the title Genghis Khan at the Kurultai in 1206, he was no longer just a tribal leader. He had become the creator of a new nation, a new identity. The word Mongol began to represent not an ethnic race, but a political identity during his time. Genghis Khan's first great success lay here. His ability to unite people from different tribes, cultures, and traditions around a single purpose. This was the foundation of the administrative system he would later apply, not just in the Mongol steppes, but throughout the world. The area where Genghis Khan's genius showed most clearly was his strategy for transitioning from military to political systems. The decimal system, Tumen, Mingan, Jagan, Arban, wasn't just military organization. This was the complete restructuring of society. The system that started with 10-person Arbans extended up to 10,000-person Tumens. But the ingenious point here was that this system worked not just during wartime, but during peacetime too. Each unit took on both military and civilian duties. Even more importantly, this system was completely meritocratic. You didn't need to come from noble blood to become a Tumen commander. Just talent and loyalty were enough. Commanders like Jib, Sabutai, Jelm, they were all children of ordinary families. But thanks to their abilities, they rose to the highest levels of the empire. This system wasn't just for Mongols either. Chinese engineers, Persian administrators, Turkish commanders. Regardless of identity, Anyone with talent could be integrated into the system. Another of Genghis Khan's revolutions was information management. In traditional nomadic society, knowledge was passed down orally. Genghis Khan understood the importance of written documentation and adapted the Uyghur alphabet. The Yassa law, the Great Law, formed the foundation of the written legal system. These laws were also extremely pragmatic. They weren't based on religious or ideological dogma. They focused only on practical benefit. Theft is forbidden, but what religion you believe doesn't matter. Espionage is punishable by death, but your ethnic origin doesn't matter. Most importantly, this system was flexible and adaptable. When they entered China, they adopted the Chinese bureaucratic system. In Iran, they used Persian traditions. In Russian territories, they supported the Orthodox Church. The system could adapt to any culture, while the fundamental principles remained the same: merit, loyalty, pragmatism. In 1209, Genghis Khan made one of the biggest decisions of his life. He decided to attack China. This wasn't just a military decision. This was a clash between two completely different civilizations. On one side was the Yuan Dynasty, heir to thousands of years of civilization, advanced technology, great cities, millions of people. On the other side were the Mongols, nomadic tribes, maybe 2 million people, written culture still in its infancy. Traditional military analysis would say the outcome of this war was clear. China wins. But Genghis Khan relied not just on his military strength, but also on his administrative intelligence. The first strategy was to exploit weaknesses in China's political structure. The Yuan dynasty was of Jurchen origin, but ruled over the Chinese Han population. He saw this ethnic tension as an opportunity. He made special diplomatic efforts to win Chinese commanders and administrators to his side. Chinese administrators, like Yelu Chukai, liked the meritocratic structure of the Mongol system and switched sides. These weren't just personal career decisions. This was the appeal of a more just system. Military strategy also supported this political approach. When Genghis Khan captured Chinese cities, he preferred integration over massacre. Local administrators could keep their positions if they cooperated. If they showed resistance, they were completely destroyed. The most important example was the fall of Beijing. In 1215, one of the world's largest cities came under Mongol control. But Genghis Khan chose to preserve the Chinese bureaucracy to govern the city. He only replaced the top levels with Mongol commanders. Behind this success was Genghis Khan's important insight: technology transfer. Chinese engineers' siege machines, gunpowder technology, administrative systems. He didn't just copy these. He developed them and spread them throughout the empire. The China campaign proved that Genghis Khan was not just a military commander, but also a visionary leader. Conquering China was one thing, but integrating China into the Mongol system was a much greater achievement. The year 1219 was a turning point in Genghis Khan's life. The conflict with the Khwarezmid Empire wasn't just a war between two countries. This was the first major clash between East and West, between nomadic culture and settled civilization. The Otrar incident, the killing of Mongol merchants, wasn't just a diplomatic crisis. This was a clash of two different worldviews. Khwarezm Shah, Ala ad-Din Muhammad, had the traditional medieval Muslim ruler mentality. Enemies are destroyed. Merchants receive second-class treatment. Diplomacy is based on shows of force. Genghis Khan's approach was completely different. For him, trade was more important than diplomacy, because trade meant stability, and stability meant a sustainable empire. The Khwarezmid War was the campaign where Genghis Khan's strategic genius showed most clearly. The classic military approach would be to gather a central army and march to the enemy's capital. Instead, Genghis Khan applied a much more sophisticated strategy. He hit the empire from multiple points simultaneously. Jib and Sabotai from the north, Tolui in the south, Gidai and Chagatai in the center. This wasn't just a military tactic. This was a strategy to collapse the enemy's political structure. Each Mongol army wasn't just conquering. They were also meeting with local administrators, offering cooperation proposals. Those who resisted were destroyed, while those who cooperated were protected. This wasn't just terror. It was also political engineering. The fall of Bukhara and Samarkand was the perfect example of this strategy. Both cities chose to surrender rather than resist, because word had spread that the Mongols treated those who cooperated well. But Genghis Khan's greatest success was establishing new systems during the war. In the territories he captured, he immediately set up administrative structures, secured trade routes, and incorporated local talents into the system. At the end of the Khwarezmian-War, he hadn't just destroyed an empire, he had also established a new order in Central Asia. This order wasn't based just on Mongol hegemony. This was a system based on mutual benefit, secure trade, and cultural tolerance. The battle at the Kalka River in 1223 was one of the turning points in European history. The Mongol army, under the command of Jib and Sabotai, had set foot on European soil for the first time. But this wasn't just military reconnaissance. This was the encounter of two completely different political systems. The Russian principalities represented typical medieval European structure: feudal fragmentation, local autocrats, legitimacy based on the church, limited central authority. A Mongol system represented the exact opposite: central authority, meritocracy, pragmatic governance, cultural tolerance. Genghis Khan's European policy was extremely calculated. He aimed for controlled influence, not complete conquest. Because Europe wasn't as wealthy as China or Iran, but its strategic importance was great, especially in terms of trade routes. Relations with the Russian princes showed the subtleties of Mongol diplomacy. Resisting princes were punished, while those who cooperated were supported, but none were completely destroyed. Because local administrative knowledge was needed, the relationship with the Orthodox Church was even more interesting. The Mongols not only tolerated the church, they actively protected it. Priests received tax exemptions. Monasteries became untouchable. This wasn't just tolerance. This was a guarantee of political stability. The most important result of the European campaigns was the transfer of knowledge and technology. The Mongols applied military technologies gained from Europe, especially castle siege techniques, in other regions. Similarly, they used technologies brought from China and Iran in Europe. This technology transfer wasn't limited to military affairs. Agricultural techniques, trade methods, administrative systems. The Mongol Empire had become a network that transported knowledge just like goods. The long-term effect of Genghis Khan's European policy was more lasting than complete conquest. The Russian principalities adopted Mongol administrative systems. These systems would form the foundation of the Russian Tsardom in later centuries. Organization. This was the complete restructuring of society. Genghis Khan's greatest achievement wasn't military conquests, but cultural integration. In the 1220s, Confucian Chinese mandarins, Muslim Persian poets, Buddhist Turkish merchants, and Christian Russian boyars were all working as parts of the same system in his empire. This integration wasn't accidental. Genghis Khan implemented a systematic cultural policy. His first principle was religious tolerance. But this meant not just tolerance, but active protection. Representatives of every religion were placed under imperial protection. The capital, established at Karakorum, was the clearest example of this policy. Buddhist temples, Islamic mosques, Christian churches, and Taoist shrines were built side by side in the city, and all were financed from the imperial treasury. This wasn't just tolerance, It was celebration of diversity. Language policy was similarly pragmatic. While the Uyghur alphabet was adopted as the official writing system, local languages were preserved in each region. Chinese in China, Persian in Iran, Slavic in Russian territories. The administrative language was the same everywhere, but cultural languages were seen as richness. Marriage policies were the most effective tool of this integration. While Mongol princes married daughters of local elite families, Mongol princesses were also given as wives to local leaders. These weren't just diplomatic marriages, they were cultural bridges. Genghis Khan's own family was also an example of this policy. His sons took wives from different cultures. Gadai's Chinese advisors, Tolui's Muslim commanders, Chagadai's Christian secretaries. Each prince was surrounded by advisors from different cultures. The most important example was court administration. Among Genghis Khan's closest advisors were Yelu Chukai, Chinese, Mahmud Yalavak, Muslim, and Yelu Ahai, Khitan. Each brought the best of their own culture to the system. This cultural integration worked not just at the top level, but at the grassroots level too. Mongol soldiers married local women and settled down. Local merchants could trade worldwide with Mongol protection systems. Craftsmen prospered with imperial orders. As a result, the Mongol Empire became not just a military hegemony, but a truly multicultural civilization. Genghis Khan's least known but most lasting achievement was creating the global trade system. From the 1220s onward, secure trade corridors stretching from the Pacific to the Atlantic were established. This was history's first globalization experiment. The Silk Road Revival Project wasn't limited to just military security. Genghis Khan established a complex logistics system. A Khan lodging place every 30 kilometers, an administrative center every 100 kilometers, a major trading city every 300 kilometers. The YAM system, the Mongol communication network, was the backbone of this trade revolution. Horse messengers could carry messages from Beijing to the Black Sea in 3 months. This speed was incredible for that time. The same message would take 1 year using traditional methods. Monetary system standardization was another revolution. Paper money in China, silver dirhams in Iran, gold coins in Europe. Acceptable currencies were determined in each region, and exchange rates were guaranteed by imperial authority. The merchant protection system was the most important. Merchants who received the Paysa-Mongol passport were safe throughout the empire. Robbery, extortion, unfair taxes, all were considered imperial crimes. Punishments were so severe that no one dared touch merchants. The Polo family was the perfect example of how this system worked. Venetian merchants could travel safely to China with Mongol passports. They lived in China for 20 years and made fortunes. This applied not just to them, but to thousands of merchants. Technology transfer was also part of trade. Gunpowder, paper, compass from China. Carpets, ceramics, perfume from Iran. Glass, metalwork, fur from Europe. Each region's special products were transported to other regions through the imperial trade network. This trade revolution wasn't just about luxury goods. Basic needs were also met through this system. Rice from China, wheat from Iran, meat from Europe. Food security was the cornerstone of imperial policy. As a result, the trade system established by Genghis Khan can be considered the ancestor of modern capitalism. Free trade, secure transportation, standardized money, merchant rights. All of these were Mongol inventions. Genghis Khan's most lasting legacy is perhaps the legal system. The Yassa Great Law wasn't just a collection of laws, but the first codification of universal justice understanding. This legal system was based on very revolutionary principles. First, everyone was equal. The Khan's son and an ordinary soldier were subject to the same laws. There was no such thing as aristocratic privilege. Whoever committed a crime, regardless of who they were, received the same punishment. Second, no religious discrimination was made. Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, shamanist. What religion you believed in wasn't considered during judgment. Only the nature of the crime mattered. Third, women's rights were protected. In Mongol culture, women had equal rights with men. This principle was also reflected in imperial laws. Women had inheritance rights, could engage in trade, and could even serve as administrators. The most interesting aspect of the Yassa was that it was practice-focused. There were no theoretical or religious justifications. There was only functionality. Theft is forbidden because it disrupts social order. Murder is forbidden because it undermines trust. Espionage is forbidden because it threatens state security. The punishment system was also extremely rational. The aim wasn't revenge, but deterrence. Fines for minor crimes, exile for major crimes, death for the most serious crimes. But punishments weren't arbitrary. They were based on codification. The judicial system was divided into central and local courts. Local courts dealt with daily crimes. Central courts dealt with state security and major crimes. But at both levels, judges were selected based on merit. The most important innovation was the appeal system. Local court decisions could be appealed. They would be retried in central court, even in imperial court. This was the guarantee of justice. Another revolutionary aspect of the Yassa was its universal applicability. Chinese legal traditions, Islamic law, Christian laws. All were utilized, but none were given priority. Only universal justice principles were applied. This legal system was so effective that even after the Mongol Empire collapsed, basic principles were preserved in many countries. The roots of modern legal systems extend back to the Yassa. The least noticed but most effective achievement of the Genghis Khan Empire was technology and knowledge transfer. For the first time in history, knowledge systematically spread across geographical and cultural boundaries. Gunpowder technology was the most dramatic example of this transfer. Gunpowder, invented in China, was developed by Mongol military engineers. Then it was used in cannon making in Iran. When it reached Europe, it completely changed castle siege technology. Paper production was another revolution. Starting from China, it spread to Iran and the Arab world. Paper factories established in Samarkand played a role in the scientific revolution of the Islamic world. Book production became cheaper. Knowledge became widespread. Printing technology also spread similarly. The system that started with wooden blocks in China was converted to metal blocks by Mongol engineers. This technology was developed in the Islamic world before reaching Europe. Medical science transfer was perhaps the most beneficial. Chinese acupuncture, Iranian pharmacy, Arab surgical techniques, Indian yoga, and meditation. All were combined under the imperial medical system. Doctors working in the Mongol court learned and combined techniques from different cultures. Similar integration occurred in astronomy and mathematics. Chinese astronomers were introduced to Islamic mathematical systems. Persian mathematicians learned the Indian number system. This knowledge exchange led to great developments for both sides. Agricultural technology transfer perhaps had the widest impact. Rice cultivation from China, irrigation systems from Iran, livestock techniques from Europe. Each region benefited from other regions. Agricultural innovations. The scholar protection system established by Genghis Khan guaranteed this transfer. Mathematicians, engineers, doctors, astronomers, all were under imperial protection. No matter what war occurred, scholars were not to be touched. On the contrary, protecting them and transporting them to different regions was the priority. The imperial library in Karakorum became the center of this knowledge transfer. Translations were made from Chinese to Arabic, from Persian to Latin. Knowledge spread by overcoming language barriers. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, he left behind not just territory, but a system. This system was so strong that it continued to work even after the empire was divided into four parts: the Yuan Dynasty in China, the Ilkhanate in Iran, the Golden Horde in Russia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia. Although each was an independent state, they all preserved the basic systems established by Genghis Khan. The principle of meritocracy continued to develop, especially in the Yuan Dynasty. The imperial examination system established in China was the evolved form of Mongol meritocracy. Tradition. Talent-based selection became the basic principle of Chinese bureaucracy. The trade network system continued to work despite political fragmentation. Marco Polo's travels took place during this period. Because trade corridors were still safe, the passport system was still working. The tradition of cultural tolerance also continued. While the Ilkhanate adopted Islam, Christian and Jewish communities were protected. Although the Yuan dynasty was Buddhist, Confucian traditions were supported. Legal system was adapted differently in each Khanate, but basic principles were preserved: equality, justice, merit. These values continued to live as Mongol legacy. The most important legacy was perhaps the governing philosophy. The principle of unity in diversity can be considered the ancestor of modern multicultural states. The ability to accommodate different ethnic, religious, and cultural groups under the same system was Genghis Khan's greatest invention. Traces of the system established by Genghis Khan can still be seen 800 years later. Modern Russia's central government tradition is based on the Mongol system. China's multi-ethnic state structure comes from the Yuan dynasty experience. The concept of globalization is actually a Mongol invention. Free trade, secure transportation, cultural tolerance, technology transfer. All of these were implemented in the 13th century. Modern diplomatic techniques also have Mongol origins. Seeking peaceful solutions, the principle of mutual benefit, multilateral agreements. Modern versions of Genghis Khan's diplomatic understanding. Even the concept of human rights has been influenced by the Yassa's universal justice understanding. Religious freedom, women's rights, equality before the law. These principles were first codified in Mongol laws. The multicultural society model is one of today's most important social issues. The integration policies that Genghis Khan implemented 800 years ago serve as examples for modern multicultural states. Technology transfer and knowledge sharing are the foundation of today's global economy. The information flow we experience in the Internet age is actually the modern version of the Mongol information network. What made Genghis Khan history's greatest administrator wasn't just the territories he conquered. He had solved humanity's most complex administrative problem, uniting millions of people from different cultures under a just and sustainable system. The secret of his genius was pragmatism. Instead of getting stuck on ideological dogmas, he focused on what worked. He chose tolerance over religious fanaticism, meritocracy over aristocracy, integration over isolation. Modern world leaders are still struggling with the problems Genghis Khan faced: how to manage cultural diversity, how to ensure economic integration, how to support technology transfer, how to preserve peace. The solutions Genghis Khan found are still valid 800 years later. Merit-based governance, cultural tolerance, economic integration, technology sharing, legal equality. Of course, he wasn't perfect either. The violence during conquests, sometimes excessively harsh punishments, constant expansion pressure. These were also part of the system. But looking at the big picture, the system Genghis Khan created was far ahead of its time. He was not just the leader of the Mongol steppes, but the creator of humanity's common heritage. Genghis Khan's story ends here, but his legacy continues. because he showed that differences are not weakness, but strength. Diversity is not chaos, but richness. And with the right leadership, even the most different societies can unite around common goals. So what do you think was Genghis Khan's greatest achievement? His military victories or his administrative system? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you love these kinds of history stories, don't forget to subscribe. Because next week, I'm going to tell you about another great leader's story. He conquered the world, but more importantly, he taught the world how to govern.